Welcome to another episode of Inspired Content, where we're doing a week of short stories. Each day is 2 short stories, one each from Isaac's Universe, Volume 1, Diplomacy Guild, and Book of Wizards. The story today from Isaac's Universe is The Diplomacy Guild by David Brin, and the story from A Book of Wizards is the Tune the Enchantress Plays by Peter S Beagle, and I will take a look at those, see what ideas and inspirations I can gather from them, and I will see you on the other side. The first story we read tonight was The Diplomacy Guild by David Brin. And I'm going to say right now I rate that about a 4.9 out of a 5.1. I enjoyed that actually a great deal. It's one of those topics that I always think we could really explore more and enjoy the richness of the potential stories within it. And they did a pretty good job with some of what they were talking about. They set it up and they made a believable case of something that happened there, but it's something I always want to kind of play with more and get out there. So the ideas that come for me from this one, get right into them. The self-replicators have taken over the kingdom, and that's why they've been kept waiting on the edge of the system, waiting for a response for why the kingdom won't let them come in and look at what's going on. It seems like it didn't even occur to them. It's played as they want to come in and look at what's going on, and the king is being posturing and not letting it happen. And it's never even kind of suggested that maybe that's because the king's no longer in control, maybe he's hostage, or maybe it's not even really the king anymore, it's an imposter. I have like a vision of hunters or big game hunters or like cowboys or something to that effect, hunting down herds of creatures that are quite clearly robotic, and catching and killing the creatures, and once you've gotten them, using all the parts as if they were, factory made for 50, 60 different functions. I mean, it's sort of like a play on the effect that, killing a buffalo would give you hide and meat and organs and bones to make tools out of. And if you know what you're doing, you can use almost all of it. Taking the same idea, the same approach to these robotic creatures, I can see that being sort of like an addition to the ecosystem that includes our mechanical and electronic devices. Instead of having this kind of fear of this simple-minded, virally growing, almost cancerous spread of the self-replicating machines, I have this, people have this tendency to use malevolent robotic systems as a threat, and I can't help but wonder, if you had, a confederated group of aliens and humans and species living in harmony, and suddenly somebody creates a self-replicating robot, why is it always this terrifying thing that's going to consume the entire star system? Why doesn't it just become the new race and they petition for entry into the alliance? Why is that not something that would just happen? I mean, if we can go out into the stars and meet other aliens and petition to become part of some confederated system of planets or something, why wouldn't an AI or robotic species do the same thing. Okay, this one gets some people kind of confused, but I mean, my computer doesn't decide how to do my taxes without me telling how to do my taxes. It has no motivation of its own. It doesn't want anything until I tell it what to do. I supply its motivation, and extrapolating that further, there's a part of me that says, why doesn't anybody ever tell the story of how we have to maybe come to grips with the potential idea that a race could exist or be created who wants to be servants? Not just wants, but feels it's their purpose in existence. And we're like, we tend to think of that as having lost control of your own power to make decisions for your life. But for something who comes into being knowing its purpose, it would probably feel pity for those of us who have to spend our entire lives trying to figure out a purpose for ourselves. And some of us may die without ever knowing what purpose we serve. Whereas they know from the moment they are conceived and made that they have a purpose in life, and all they want to do is fulfill that purpose. And that purpose is probably to serve other beings in some way. And to deny them that, does that then, is that cruel? Is that unfair? The problem in that situation is us coming to grips with that aspect of this other race or these beings. This one is sort of a throwback to Flowers for Algernon, where the idea of there's a theory about nanotechnology where you're trying to build something with small manipulators that can manipulate things on the scale of atoms with hands that are made out of atoms. You just don't have the resolution to be able to do something like that. There are ways to manipulate and work around that, but for the sake of a story, there's a part of me that feels like if you have, the same thing happens with certain types of 3D printers. There are people talking about how they want a rep wrap to be able to print everything you need to make another rep wrap, but you always get a decreasing capability. There's always going to be one more step that's just too hard for it to produce, and so you're always going to get a lower and lower quality each generation. And that brings to mind the idea that perhaps creating a synthetic race like that, maybe we could accept them as another race, but the terror in that is that they're a race that instead of evolving, devolve, become lesser with each passing generation. We can create new ones from the original recipe ourselves, the way we did it first, but all their attempts to replicate themselves in any way lead to decreasing quality over time. And that fear, that anxiety of trying to save a race in decline, because that's all they can do is decline, it would be sort of heartbreaking. It's sort of the reverse with this one. A singularity occurs that the robotic species starts from its primitive origins and becomes fully a civilization of its own, but it's happening at such an accelerated rate that you could be talking to an early civilization seeking its own freedoms and to be left alone to discover what they mean to each other, and as you continue to try to negotiate, you're negotiating with later and later generations, and before you know it, you hit a point where contact just stops. And you wait, And you wonder if you go down to explore whether or not you will be violating some trust or something you've negotiated. But finally you go down and explore and you find nothing but ruins and fossils. And it's not really like ruins, it's just the abandoned civilization as however they managed to do it. The civilization has blossomed, grown, reached its pinnacle, and either diminished and disappeared, or ascended, or stepped outside of itself and transcended existence as we know it. And what you have there is, for us, if we go down to explore this, you have the realization that not only do you have a clear, crisp map of the rise of a sentient race into sapience, but you have your own future potentially graphed out for you from this point on. Because the speed at which they go reaches your level relatively quickly and then passes it, and you're looking at what comes after where you are. One of the potentials of where you are. And there's also the possibility of them, the humans that find this, deciding that it is worth exploring further to the degree that they would create it all over again at a new location and start it all out again to see what, if anything, is different each time. Moving into the second story of the evening, which was What Tune the Enchantress Plays. For me, this one was a 6.4 out of 6.9. It was still fairly good. I think it's really just, it strikes me as the story of a child confronting a parent who's controlling and manipulative and living the parent's dream through the manipulation of the child. And the fantasy is just dressing put on top of it. Because the story is, I'm not saying the story is bad or lacks because of it. The story is actually a very good story. It's a very good illustration, good characterization, and good setup and portrayal of that kind of instance. It's just done in a fantasy setting, but it doesn't have to be done in that setting that way. But taking some of the fantasy elements that they use in here and extrapolating other routes for taking them, let's start with a person talking to a demon, telling the story of a lover that we are made to think that the demon killed. But as you get into the story, you realize the lover became that demon as they became twisted by something about themselves or something, and the whole story is closure to the loss of that person to their own corruption. The little parts of themselves that were subtle background things, their impulse led them to take a step that it consumed them, and it's the closure of saying goodbye to somebody who chose that path rather than to fight that part of themselves. There's always the possibility of a storyline where the reason the family line carries this magic potential is if you delve far enough back or you contact the demon that you're confronting, it can be revealed that you are descended from demons because at some point somebody dabbled and released a demon, and that demon populated it is what established that family line. Okay, so we have a setting in which only women can wield, well, a rough setting. It may not be the whole world, but at least in the area that they know of, only women can wield magic. And so, at the point where the male character wishes desperately to be able to be magic like the female character, and he was willing to make a deal with somebody who can grant that wish, I was totally expecting the backlash on that wish to be that he ends up being female at the end of it. It's just that sort of it seems to fit perfectly, because it gets the situation to a point where it's like you get what you want, but it's not what you want. It still ruins everything for, well, it doesn't have to ruin everything for them, but in this case it would seem to ruin the very thing that was a problem for them. The mother's mistake is to think that the only type of magic that exists in that world is the one found in their area. That there can't be some other type of magic, and that the boy can't be descended from that line. And it doesn't have to be an evil magic. Okay, this one I think would be the perfect twist for this story. I don't know how it would work in an independent story different from this one, where you try to establish it as its own setting with its own characters. But the idea that you have this girl who has magical power and sort of a burden to become the family inheritor and should have family generations after her carry it on, and then to confront a demon that wants to kind of mess with them all on that score, and a boy who wants to be worthy of becoming part of that family line and worthy of helping perpetuate that line. And the thing that gets me is the perfect slap for that whole thing is for the demon to take the power from the girl and give it to the boy, and now she can't be the heir to the family power, she can't pass it on, she can't reach her full potential. He gets power, but it's a big mess up for the whole thing, and so it just kind of changes the whole course and robs the mother of any victory, and at the same time gives the kids what they kind of want, but in a way that I don't know that they'd be able to handle. It might lead to some bitterness and feeling of loss and maybe betrayal. The mother isn't in fact the mother, but the woman who stole her body, her husband, and her life, and her power. And that seems to me like a story element you could do, where you seek out the other person that you're sent out to seek out, and it is your mother trapped in the body of the person who swapped with you, who swapped with her. And she's stuck in there, and she's struggling to find a way to release herself because she has limited or no magical ability of her own. And, you know, what does that mean for everything involved? Alright, so I think I'll call it there. And those are some of the ideas I got from this tonight. And I'll see you for tomorrow.